I'm Joshua, and I'm an INTP, and first and foremost, I'd like to say thank you for viewing this video and subsequently visiting my channel. The topic of this video is going to be on Jordan B. Peterson and Christianity Part 2. This video is going to be brief because I'm behind on homework and I have I have a lot of other things I need to take care of, and so I'm not going to be able to spend a lot of time in front of the camera, but I did just want to go ahead and finish this argument up so people can really understand the thrust and the position of what it is I'm saying. Well, so where I left off was trying to demonstrate that Christianity is not an individualism, and it most certainly is not. One could say that existentialism is an individualism, and thus, since Christianity is not an individualism, Christianity cannot be an existentialism. But there is an even sharper point to make about the misappropriation of Christianity by Jordan B. Peterson, and that is that Christianity is not an existentialism insofar as Christianity has a solution for human suffering or the existential burdens of mankind. And that solution was salvation through Christ and still is salvation through Christ. Even if people are not satisfied with Christianity, even if Christianity has been criticized and has lost some popularity or has lost some of its theological or doxological weight, it's still what it is and will be what it is for the remainder of history, so long as we continue to remember it and it's still with us. Christianity's answer is salvation through Christ. If you have an existential burden and you're looking to do something about that existential burden through a secular, approach, then Christianity is not the answer, and it can't be the answer because Christianity is not a Jungian philosophical object. And even though Jung has his philosophy about Christianity, or at least his, his psychoanalytic take on Christianity, the psychoanalysis of Christian theology is not the, I don't know. Jung was a different kind of thinker, and I would say this, that Jung did not believe Christianity was the answer in the classical sense of the idea of Christianity. Jung was more sympathetic towards Christianity, but Jung had some of the same views and ideas that Nietzsche had about Christianity. They both felt that Christianity went wayward when it became an institutionalized thing, and Jung more so than Nietzsche, because Jung was the believer in a sort of transcendental persona or idea. Jung believed in a God, but what Jung believed about God was that man can't know it in any precise way, and whatever descriptions or cultural renditions we have of our encounter with what he considered the numinous, which happens to be our religious systems, that is just man's interpretation. It's something of a grasping at shadows. A lot like the idea of Plato's idea of the cave. We only see the impressions of God, but we really don't know or understand what he is to any degree. And the only way we can understand or know is through our own personal revelations, through the process of individuation and being lowly. And Jung had this idea that part of the reason why people don't understand or can't see God is because people don't do enough of the things that really animate our existence, in the sense of we have a certain evolutionary history and we don't stay true to that evolutionary fingerprint or thumbprint that's on our soul, as Jung would say, because Jung believed in a soul. I'm not saying my ideas or anything like that. I'm just expressing, just as best as I can at this point, what Jung seemed to think. Now, why is that not Christianity? Because Jung was not particular to any religion whatsoever. Jung saw Christianity as a vehicle for the Westerner to begin the process of individuation, because Jung thought that, well, if you're looking at the Western landscape, Jung had a few different religions that he said were the reasons for why the West looks the way that it does, but most dominantly within recent years, Christianity has been the thing, though Aryan and though alchemy, the pagan Norse mythologies and beliefs, and the Aryan mythologies and beliefs, and Gnosticism were all things that Jung paid attention to, because he saw those things as the real roots for the germination of the identity of the individual in the West. But it was a much more complicated picture for Jung than it is for Jordan Peterson, at least from whatever Jordan B. Peterson tends to express when he's talking about his ideas in public. So I've never had a private discussion with him, and I've never really heard him talk about these things with other people, so I really don't know what his take is on these things, but I just know that what Jung was doing and what Jung was up to is much different than what Jordan B. Peterson is up to. So I don't necessarily consider Jordan B. Peterson a Jungian, even though he talks about Carl Jung. I do not give his ideas or his philosophies the same kind of weight that I do Jung. I don't agree with Jung necessarily, but I very much so respect him as a thinker, and I make sure I understand and try to the best of my ability to understand what he's talking about and what he's saying, because even if I don't buy the metaphysics of it, there's definitely a truth to the thing of Jung's analysis, in the sense that Jung had a very broad sweeping analysis about what it means to be an individual in the West and what gives rise to ideation in Western history and culture. And Jung was everywhere, and that's just what I'll say. And so I don't consider Jordan B. Peterson a Jungian. I'm not saying he hasn't read Jung or anything like that, but it's just that I don't consider him a Jungian from, I guess, like, classical Jungian standpoint, I suppose. And I suppose, like, what's my criticism ultimately about all of this is that I've taken the time, I guess, to understand Jung or Christianity from a classical approach. I don't know if there's a classical approach when it comes to understanding Jung or Christianity, but I do think I know what they were trying to communicate and what they're about. And I think that if you see Christianity as a system of ideas or as a worldview, and if you look at Jungian topology, not topology, but, well, Jungian topology is a part of Jung's metaphysics. Jung had his own metaphysics. If you think Jungian metaphysics is an appropriate worldview, or is a type of worldview, Christianity and Christian metaphysics and Jungian metaphysics are not commensurate. Not with how they are in, not how Jung developed it, and you've developed his metaphysics, and not with how Christianity is made up in its metaphysical structure, because Christianity thinks it's a real thing. If not that Christianity has ideas or anything like that, but even if somebody's not a fundamentalist Christian, nobody can be a Christian or buy in or accept, and I'll put it like this. So the reason why I think the way that I think about Christianity is because you do not have the love thy neighbor just for any damn reason in the Bible. It just didn't spring up in the Bible or the Christian metaphysical thought from happenstance. All of those things are pretty contingent on a certain set of suppositions that you must first take about the nature of the world and reality to think those things in the first place, or you got no business thinking those things. Even if they're embedded in your culture per se, they're just ideas that people carry around because we happen to be historically Presbyterian or something like that, at least here in America. that does not mean that that's something that you should just accept or believe wholesale. Not because it's not because it's problematic or something like that, but because those beliefs and those ideas come with a certain weight, and you can't really act them out, or really you can't actually. So here is a difference, and this is what I get this from Nietzsche. So this isn't necessarily me, but though I act this out in my life. Here's a difference between knowing something and believing something. Beliefs you act out. Knowledge, you have it and you can act it out, or you could not act it out, but it's something more of a thought experiment or a hypothesis. You have ideas and you spit those ideas out into the world so that you don't die. But they're things that are part of your non-acting space. You don't act with ideas, though ideas lead you to act and things like that. I know that from cognitive science or neuroscience, but from the philosophical standpoint, you're not to say that I'm not keeping empiricism or anything like that in mind. What I mean, even keeping empiricism in mind, it's the case that you can have a fantasy and you can think something is a good thing, and you can generally say and express in most socially acceptable situations a certain amicability, and you can generally be nice to people and you can generally forgive people and things like that. But when Christianity says love thy neighbor, it is not talking about being nice. It's not talking about being friendly. It's not talking about being generally amicable. It's asking you to sacrifice yourself for other people. And it doesn't mean that you just give up your position in the line of, the grocery store. It's a lot more serious than that. Just to be frank, only reason I say it is because I was a Christian for a very, very long time, and I think that Jordan B. Peterson, he, to me, waters down Christianity or degrades it. Very much so, it cheapens it, because it's not, just because it's something that I guess like 1.6 billion people in the world believe, and just because it's commonplace for us to experience these ideas and we've heard the stories and things like that, it's just not the case that you cannot approach Christianity from the standpoint of pop philosophy or general psychology. There is a psychology that's behind the Bible, but the point of the Bible is not human psychology. I can tell you that. I mean, it has things to do with human psychology. At least it's only that way if you. So, look, man, like, I think this. Like, if you you have to look at the Bible from the standpoint of the Bible. You have to be fair in that way. At least I think that that's fair. That book is not there because it's there to be psychoanalyzed. The book is there to be something of a means of transforming an individual in a certain way to have a relationship with God. But what I think about a relationship with God is very different than maybe what you find in your, I guess, like, normal non-denominational Christian churches and everything like that. To be a Christian is a very serious thing, even if people don't treat it like that, and even if it shows up on South Park and things like that. It's, we make fun of it and everything like that, but those ideas are particular things. They're old, and just because they're old is not why I'm giving them weight or reverence or anything like that. It's just that so would you think that I would put it like this? Would you think that I'm not saying Christianity and Mein Kampf are the same things. I'm not saying that at all. But do you think you could casually be a Nazi or something like that? Or you can just, I mean, I'm sure people can read Mein Kampf and things like that and just muse what does that mean, and what is its relationship to me and history at this point in time in life, and maybe what was Hitler really up to and everything like that, and did it make any kind of sense? Where does it fit in the whole history of philosophical ideas or political ideas and everything like that? But at that point, that's an intellectual exercise. Christianity is not an intellectual exercise. At least Mein Kampf was not supposed to be an intellectual exercise at all either. It's a piece of antiquity now because of a very prominent war that happened at some point in time in history, but its purpose was not to be an intellectual exercise. And I know that Jordan B. Peterson is not trying to merely act out an intellectual exercise. I just think that he's misplaced in his appropriation of Christianity. And he's not really trying to give a metaphysical answer to the existential, or at least his metaphysics is not Christian metaphysics. I should just put it like that. I don't know what Jordan B. Peterson's metaphysical view of the world is, but whatever it is, it's not a Christian metaphysics. Even if he uses Christianity, it's not a Christian metaphysics, and it's not a Jungian metaphysics. It's a combination of things, various things, but whatever it is, it's particular and unique to him. And so you ought to be careful about assuming things about Jordan B. Peterson's speech in terms of what you think he means, what you think he's saying, because whatever he's saying, he's not a Christian, I'll just put it like that, and he's not necessarily a Jungian, but, Jordan B. Peterson is Jordan B. Peterson. I'll just put it like that. Next, I would say that past that point, that whole point is to say what the seed of my analysis is. Christianity is not an existentialism in the sense of this. There's an absolute answer to the existential woes of mankind, and that's salvation through Christ and rectifying yourself to God, and your fallen nature. And so that's it. And there is no pizzazzing it up. Sometimes I think that that's what Jordan B. Peterson is trying to do, because, things like attendance, church attendance and things like that have gone down in America and Western countries in general. I do understand that for people to have a set of ideas and beliefs that animated their cultures for a very, very long time and their world and way of being, I do understand the danger in having those things disappear, but I always put it like this. Christianity was so effective at its job that it put itself out of a job. I mean, to be frank, I think that, that's always my thinking. I don't know if that's how other people look at it or anything like that, but that's always how I looked at Christianity. Because, one, I think that it's not true literally, and so what I think Christianity did was subjugate Europe and a whole lot of people under a certain set of beliefs and ideals. And I think whenever you make that sort of structure in the world where you're asking people to be a particular kind of thing for an extended period of time, you're asking people to evolve into a certain kind of creature, and you're asking people to evolve into a certain psychology. And so I think that the world, it's imprinted to some extent in our DNA. Now, Jordan B. Peterson thinks this too to a certain degree, but he and I depart from what we think that the ultimate conclusions about this is. Nietzsche thought these things too. I mean, that's why Nietzsche didn't like Christianity, because Nietzsche thought this: man started off as a very brilliant and glorious thing, and then Christianity came and dominated the space and became our new master, and we evolved into this more docile, ugly thing. You can think of it like this. At first, man, in the way nature made him in the first few civilizations that came about were things that were predicated on various ideas, mostly revolving around self-glorification and aggrandizement and power, and that was the thing. Courage, strength, honor, discipline, those were the wisdom, those are the virtues, because those always lead to self efficacy and enterprise. I mean, it's Aristotle that we get from Aristotle that we get the word magnanimity, which he meant great soul. Which is different than a benevolent person. But my point with that is that Nietzsche thought that, well, that's how we started off, and we were kind of like very, very, very powerful, majestic animals and beasts, especially Vikings, and especially the German early Germanic tribes of the upper parts of Europe that stretched everywhere from all over the place. I mean, it's yeah, whatever. It's so Germanic tribes, Vikings, the Romans, the Greeks. It was the case that when Nietzsche looked at what Europe was before the rise of Christianity, he thought that that was a much more glorious kind of animal. And then he saw Christianity and he thought, well, Christianity basically turned us into pugs. If we started off as wolves, we became pugs or something like that. Jordan B. Peterson has different sympathies towards that deal. I have mixed ideas and things about that, but I would just say that to me it does make sense from the standpoint of what human beings are, that we're fairly plastic things, and whatever we become that way because of the social pressures that are placed on us and that ask us to conform to certain images. It's why IQ is increasing, because whenever it was the case that we're IQ has been steadily increasing in Western populations since about the 50s. And there's a reason why it increased around that time, because you have World War I, World War II, and the space race in the Cold War. I mean, it's not a mystery or a secret that most of what led to the proliferation of technology was the desire to, dominate the world through various means of various empires, imperialism, American imperialism and European imperialism and the rise of IQ all have serious correlation. Nobody wants to say it like that, but to me, that's just, all those things seem to be very correlated. I mean, I don't know if that's not in a study, but that's just my hypothesis. Okay, it makes sense to me that if you see an increase in IQ from the 50s onwards, that I think now part of the reason why it's happening now most precisely is because we saw that our interest in doing those things, the particular military ventures, also led to very frugal capitalistic ventures, and you had the emergence of Silicon Valley in the 60s, primarily because of the spillover of various technologies and the development of various labs like Bell Labs and William Shockley and Shockley and transistor technology and things like that. I mean, it all happened around the same time because those goals of the government, the political structure, the wealth distribution that happened because of the, paybacks from the 50s and World War in 40, everywhere from the 30s to the 50s. Once we got past the Great Depression, I'm talking specifically here in America, it was the case that suburbs began to pop up, money began to redistribute itself. A lot of factors were going in a certain direction. I'll just put it like that. A lot of factors correlated such that around the 60s, it made sense that people were really using the intellect as a means to analyze the world better so that one could find technology or means of servicing others that would lead to greater economic boon and gain. And that's basically what everybody's trying to do right now. I mean, you look at how many apps people are developing or starting an online business, or Google Analytics or Cambridge Analytics and everything like that. We're still under the zeitgeist of that way of thinking, and or that mode of being, and it's making it's hyper developing our intellectual way of being. That's the way I'd put it. In this day and age, you're supposed to think. It's not a it's a measuring stick. It's the way in which people evaluate one another. Whatever. That's another discussion, but what I mean for all of that to demonstrate is just that, what we choose to do with ourselves in terms of what ideas and what values we hold as a society, over time those things lead us to different ways of being, and those ways of being become instantiated in our physiology, and we become different kinds of creatures because of these things. And so when it comes to Christianity, it may be the case that we're in some ways genetically Christian, or we have the ability to be amicable and cooperative and orchestrate ourselves in large social dynamics and things like that in rather benevolent ways and things, and we have altruism and various features like that more so these days because of what Christianity was for us in the past. And that's not something anybody should, I guess, disavow. It's going to differ per person and everything like that, because it's not like everybody was Christian or something like that. But I mean, it's definitely the case that we're historically Christian. We're historically Christian. Even if we're not a Christian now, we're historically that way. But just because we're like that doesn't mean that we ought to go back to Christianity. And two, just because we're like that doesn't mean that people can basically treat Christianity any way that seems convenient to themselves. Christianity is something you can study. It certainly is something that you can study or have, or you certainly can have an intellectual exercise concerning yourself with Christianity, Christian theology, and Christian doxology. But that wasn't the point of Christianity. I mean, and it's the case that it can't bring meaning to your life without you assuming the suppositions that are requisite within that text in order for that text to have life and give you life. You don't have life or can't receive life from Christianity unless you believe in God and unless you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. Those are the only ways, and Jesus was pretty clear in his expression that he is the way, the truth, and the life, and the only way that you come to the Father is through him. And so Christianity is not an existentialism. It's just not an existentialism. It's something much more complicated, in certain ways, than existentialism, though I wouldn't. In other ways, not so much, but in very much so in terms of what it is as an entity, or what it is as a system. It's not you can't turn Christianity into philosophy. It's not philosophy. It really isn't. And I think that if people are really looking for a secular answer to the existential tragedy of our lives, then you can't go Christianity. You can't go Christianity. Not because Christianity is necessarily a bad thing, and not because you shouldn't be a Christian, because I'm not going to tell anybody what they should or shouldn't be. It's just that there is no halfway Christians, or there is no I know that there are a lot of different kinds of churches and things nowadays, and that there are many different sects and denominations. But I would say, to me, that those are very clear indicators to the decline of Christianity, rather than being an indicator of Christianity's universality or something like that. Or it's Christianity is very complex, but it's not multifaceted. There are not 1,001 moving parts to it. It's a very particular thing, and it's a certain kind of thing. And the more and more people try to make it other things, the less and less and less and less and less it is Christianity. That may sound harsh, but it's the truth, in the sense that you have to believe in God, you have to believe in Christ, and you have to believe in Christ in a certain framework, or else it doesn't make sense. It stops being consistent. You have to stop reading the Bible or believing the Bible, and you have to start doing other things, And when you stop doing those things and you start doing other things, then you principally stop being a Christian, because if you're basing it off of what the Bible says that a Christian is, it's pretty clear that you are supposed to be someone who is led by faith. You gain faith by hearing the Word and reading the Word. You are not supposed to not meet and congregate amongst yourselves. You are not smart enough to figure it out all on your own. You need some type of authority over you. You are subject to revelation, and you certainly ought to pray, you ought to fast, you ought to tithe, and you better be preparing yourself for the judgment day, because it's coming at some point in time. Do not let your do not let your light go out in your lantern. You're supposed to be storing up the oil. That's what you're supposed to be doing. Christianity is a very, 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 very particular kind of thing. And if that's not something that appeals to you, or if you know not what the hell I'm talking about, you're not a Christian. You're not a Christian. And there's nothing wrong with that. Some people are Christian because a lot of other people are Christian. I think it's 1.6 billion people in the world are Christian. I think when you're looking at America, there's several million Christians in America, like hundreds of millions of Christians. But I would even say within the hundreds of millions of Christians that are within America that profess some faith in something, they do not have faith in Christianity. They have faith in something. Maybe it's their pastor, maybe it's their church, maybe it's their congregation, maybe it's the money that their church has, maybe it's the image of certain things, various New Age movements, various forms of Gnosticism that pose as Christianity, or various intellectual schools of Christianity. People have their own theories of Christianity, especially within academia. Some people have the idea of the imitation, and it's just supposed to be an expression of a certain imitation. You're supposed to profess faith in the sense that you act out a certain set of ethics, but those ethics can be separated and divorced from certain passages in the text, because who can really interpret those things? Who knows what they mean? There's a historical kind of context to them, and so we're not privy to them, so we're just going to ignore those things and pay attention to mostly just Jesus, and we're just going to pay attention to Jesus mostly as an individual who was here to be a promoter of the value of human welfare, and and that's it, And I think too, like, Jesus was not here to promote the value of human welfare. If you take a gander in Revelations, man, whatever that guy, whatever it's about, it's not necessarily just about human welfare. Like, God is not something that is very much so quick to mind human sensibilities. God is terrifying, God is absolutely terrifying. There's something, if you really think about the idea and not the idea, I mean, like, if you think, well, to me, God is an idea, but I mean, I'm saying treat God as if God is a person, or not a person, but a persona, a force, a intellect, a mind, a thing, an entity, spirit, something like that. If you think about God like that, terrifying, very, very, very terrifying sort of thing, which is why the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, because as a Christian, you're supposed to recognize the fact that whatever the Bible is about, it's not a description of human psychology. Maybe it talks about human psychology because God created humans and things like that, but whatever it is, if you're a Christian, it's not about us. It's not about human nature. It's not about human beings. If anything, it's trying to show that the problem with human beings is that they think a little too much about themselves, and they do not think enough about the things that truly matter in the world. And what matters in the world, according to the Bible, is God. And principally, that's the only thing that's going to matter in the world. And you had better learn that, because the point and the purpose of your existence is to be in a relationship with God and to communicate His glory to all those whom you come in contact with. And you are just a vessel, something that's here to act out a will that is supreme to your own little finite... I don't know, man. It's just, whatever America, generally thinks about Christianity, I would advise you to look at it for yourself. And I'd say, too, that if you think Christianity is an existentialism, that you've been misled. Kierkegaard was certainly interested in Christianity, but Kierkegaard was trying to solve a certain problem. I'm not saying I dislike Kierkegaard or anything like that, but Kierkegaard was trying to solve a certain problem. Kierkegaard felt Christianity was becoming too damn vanilla and too institutionalized, and was very much so infected by a certain Hegelian and a certain Hegelian, Kantian, and all other kinds of metaphysics that didn't necessarily have anything to do with faith or the Bible or anything like that. Kierkegaard despised the idea of Christianity being a rational thing, because it really wasn't. It really wasn't supposed to be that. The idea of an intellectual Christian was not, and it's not like Kierkegaard was an idiot or anything like that, or he didn't believe in intellectualism or rationalism or anything like that to a certain degree, but it's definitely the case that Kierkegaard did not like modern Christianity, and so he was trying to solve the problem of modern Christianity, because he felt like modern Christianity left people without a purpose, and it left them without a direction, because it had become so weak in its actual structure. It could no longer persuade or convince people to take the leap of faith and give themselves over to the irrational fervor that is to be possessed by the Holy Spirit and to move for the Spirit of the Lord. And if you read, like the Variety of Religious Experiences by William James, who, by the way, is not a Christian, it's the case that you probably would better understand what Kierkegaard means by a leap of faith. And it's just that Christianity is not a cute thing, it's not something that you can just cuddle up to and possess as your own, or make your philosophy out of, the minute you start thinking it's about your philosophy, then you've really seriously transgressed some lines, in the sense that you're not quite, you don't understand, you just don't understand. But it's okay. I mean, like, I'm not a Christian or anything like that, but I guess I give ideas. I'm fair, in the sense that I try to understand things for what they actually are. Not in terms of what I'd like them to be, not in terms of what I want to think that they are, just as what I can make out in terms of whenever I'm the least emotional, and whenever I'm the least interested in, I guess, like, I'm not saying that to be a good thinker you have to be disinterested in knowledge or anything like that, but I think that you, at the same time, if you're going to be somebody, so I would say it's like this, why would you make Christianity into something that you prefer? It's because you feel like that you have a certain set of values that it doesn't serve. And so because it doesn't serve your values, you're going to try to morph it into something that does serve your values. Well, I'd say this. If your values are so great, they're so big and so grand that they can support the structure of your existence, then make your own damn system, That's, to me, a communication of the strength of your values, If you really believe in yourself, and if you really think you are something, then go stand out there and be something. But don't hide behind Christianity, and don't misuse Christianity, because it's a particular kind of thing, I mean, there's a passage in the Bible that Jesus says that's pretty chilling. He says that in the last day, my second coming, basically, that there will be many who say, Lord, Lord, or Master, Master, I've done many great works in your name. And he's just going to look at them and say, I never knew you. Because, there's something particular to Christianity. And it is not an existentialism. That's not a knock on it. That's not disrespect, but it is not an existentialism from a philosophical standpoint, and from a theological and doxological standpoint. Christianity is not an existentialism, and you should not use it as one. Also, Jordan B. Peterson is not actually operating under a Christian metaphysics, and he's not operating under a Jungian metaphysics. What metaphysics he's operating under, I don't know. Partly because, I just haven't taken the time to really try to figure it out. But I could tell pretty quickly that whatever his metaphysics are, they're not the things that he refers to or he expresses in the strict sense of things. And I think, too, that's why he's very hesitant on answering certain questions, such as, does he believe in God? Because he probably has his own metaphysical conception or interpretation of what God is, but it's not something that's particular to the Bible, or it's not something that's particular to Jung probably either. He probably takes from Jung's concept that when people talk about God, they just mean their own God, their own personal Jesus. Johnny Cash has a song, and it's basically good enough here to communicate what I mean. That's probably what he thinks, and he doesn't want to be trapped in the intellectual claptrap of the small-minded appropriations of certain individuals. And so maybe that's why he dodges that question. And also, too, maybe he just doesn't want people to know that he's not saying what they may think that he means. And I find it very hard to believe, as a psychologist, that he doesn't know what people mean by things. I would just say I find it very hard to believe that. I don't know for him if it's all an intellectual exercise of trying to get people to realize the ideas that live in their own heads, or the presuppositions that they're making whenever they are confronting an individual about this or that. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know him personally, and I cannot read his mind, but I would just say, with somebody with 20 years of clinical psychological experience, it would seem to me that you would know what people are talking about. You know, if you've read all of the things that you've read and you know as much about Western culture and you know as much about human psychology, then chances are you could give a straight answer about whether or not you believe in God. You know, I think that if you're really interested in answering the question in the first place, if somebody asks me, do I believe in God? The answer is no, I don't. But that doesn't mean I don't understand what it is or what it means or anything like that. Maybe it's just the case that he's trying to protect his popularity or something like that. I'm not really sure, because there are millions and millions and millions and hundreds of millions of Christians within the Western Hemisphere and 1.6 billion around the world. So chances are, if you say you're not a Christian, you're probably not going to be a very popular person, you know. But it's just the case that I think, be honest, damn it. Like, it's just like, be honest, you know, and it's, you know, and I don't know, sometimes I feel like he's dishonest. That's the impression I get, but I don't really know if he is that way or if he isn't that way. I've never actually been able to have a conversation with him, so I am not going to be unfair to his beliefs, but I will say that he has gotten people to believe things like Christianity is an existentialism, and he's gotten people to believe that Christianity is an individualism, and neither of those things are true. You know, whatever Christianity is, it's not those things, and I'm not going to be able to tell you what Christianity is specifically beyond certain hints of what it's not, because in order for you to understand what Christianity is, you have to be a Christian. That's just the bottom line, you know, like, that really is the bottom line, you know. It's partly the only reason I understand what Christianity is, because I was a Christian for a very long time, for a very, very long time, but I'm no longer a Christian, you know, and I have my reasons, so, yeah, that's my video on why Christianity, on Jordan B. Peterson and Christianity Part 2, why Christianity is not an existentialism. Thank you for watching.